welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to talk about ableism. Ableism can be a tricky topic because it can be really hard to define what it is, and sometimes things appear to be inclusive and positive towards disabled people and yet are still ableist, because sometimes if you don't have experience of that type of thing, you don't have the knowledge and the understanding of why things are problematic to different groups of people. And so it's super important to educate ourselves on groups that we don't experience. Ableism is discrimination or prejudice against people who have disabilities or are non-able-bodied or neurodiverse, different than what society considers usual, either physically or mentally. And ableism is the prejudice or discrimination against this group. Ableism can be the obvious bullying someone who is disabled, using slurs, things like that. Those are all very obvious forms of ableism. However, there is also covert ableism, like there's covert racism and covert sexism. There is covert ableism that may go unnoticed to most people. You might not even know that it's offensive or harmful, and that's what I want to talk about today, the things that kind of fly under the radar and cause problems for people like me and lots of other people, but aren't necessarily seen as problematic by the general public who don't experience the same things that we do. So there is a huge amount of ableism in the media, both in factual television and in character-based fiction. The media is a big peddler of this covert ableism, and I think most of the time they don't know they're doing it because of lack of education on the subject. So some of the topics I'm going to cover in this video are toxic positivity, inspiration porn, the idea that characters with disabilities need to be fixed, and a whole culture of don't let your disability ruin your life. These things are very pervasive in our society. A lot of the time people who are guilty of joining in with these problems don't know that they're doing it. They're trying to be nice, they're trying to be helpful, and yet they're missing the mark. So let's talk about the idea that people with disabilities need to be fixed. So you see it all the time in films, TV. Someone will get a disability and it'll be really hard, they'll really struggle, it'll be so difficult, and then they'll overcome it. And either they'll get magically better, or science will come in and save the day, something, magical happens. I've already said magic could get better, but get better, magic, science are the three main reasons that people get better from their disabilities. And though it was obviously true that some people are temporarily disabled, a lot of people get disabled or are born disabled and just stay disabled. All the stories with representation for disabled people have them in the end not being disabled. So either they're not disabled, or they spend the whole story wishing about not being disabled. And I'm not saying that people with disabilities don't wish they could be able-bodied, because it depends on the person. But especially people who have been disabled a long time, you get used to it, and you don't wish for an able body anymore, because you don't expect to have one, and it's a waste of time and hope and all that kind of stuff. You get to a point where I'm okay with this. This body's not great and it has some flaws, but I love it and it's trying its best and it's okay. And so you see things like Avatar, and the guy in the wheelchair is so incredibly depressed that he's willing to go into a different body for a corporation and do something bad just to have the chance to be able to walk. Or Artie in Glee, who spends the whole time wishing that he's going to be able to walk, dreaming about robot legs. And he also gets up and has these dream dance sequences where he can stand up out of his wheelchair, and he's not happy with himself and he's not happy in his situation, and he can't focus on anything because he's too busy being upset that he's in a wheelchair. And I don't think think that's particularly helpful. Why can't we have stories where people will just be people who happen to be in wheelchairs or happen to have disabilities and use mobility aids? Why do they always have to spend their whole time wishing that they were not? Because that doesn't help people who are going through it. It doesn't help people to see that, to see themselves represented in a character who doesn't like themselves, who wishes they weren't in their own body, who is living for 20 years in the future when they're going to get robot legs or whatever it is, when science is going to fix their illness. We need representation that shows people living within their capacity, but also achieving things, but not being magical, but not being depressed. The two options are they get better and it's magical and they can run a marathon and they can fly and they're above average. They're always above average. The blind person can see in a special way, super strong echolocation, so they're better at seeing than the average person. Or, you know, someone who couldn't walk can now run a marathon. They're way above average, or they don't get better and they wish they could. The ending of the story is tragic because they don't recover. Now, I would like to be fit and healthy, and I would even like magical powers. That would be great, but I don't see that happening. And if it doesn't, my life's not a tragedy. I had some, shall we say, some tragic moments when everything was changing and I was depressed and my body betrayed me and, it was hard. But that was a couple of years, and then I learned to accept it. But these aren't the only two options. And I think that it's kind of damaging to suggest that you can recover or you can be depressed about the fact you haven't recovered. Whereas there's a middle ground of you get used to it and then you live a life, and sometimes I have to sit down more than people and I have to rest more, and if I go and do something fun I have to sleep the next day. It's not a tragedy, it's slightly inconvenient. And I don't think that that's a helpful message, because it suggests that the only way you can be happy is to get better. And for lots of people, that's just not an option. It's simply impossible. So it's an unhelpful trope, if you ask me. Another problematic thing that you quite often see, especially in social media, is toxic positivity. There is an abundance of think positive, you can get through this, you can do this, you can make your life great, don't have negative thoughts, they hold you back, and things like that. And obviously positive thinking is very beneficial and it can be very helpful and it can help with your mindset and lots of things. Toxic positivity quite often has the result of telling people that they can't be sad, or they can't have bad days, or they can't talk about an illness or something difficult going on in their life in even slightly negative way, because you need to be positive. Well, you can't always be positive, and sometimes you need to be upset about things. You need to get it off your chest, you need to talk about it. And also sometimes being negative is important for you to get the help you need. Being positive and saying, oh, I'm great all the time, sometimes means that people who are incredibly positive don't get the help they deserve. And it's problematic to suggest that people should never be negative about anything, because negative things happen and we have negative feelings, and we should be able to talk about them and not feel bad or not be shamed for not being 100% positive. It can also manifest itself as other people have it worse than you, so feel good about yourself, and also not helpful. Other people do have it worse than me. I know that in a lot of ways I'm very lucky, but that doesn't mean that I'm not allowed to be sad sometimes about whatever it is that's going on with me. When I was 17 years old, my body had completely changed. It all of a sudden couldn't do anything. It was exhausted, it was painful. I would say, severely depressed, and obviously there were people who had it worse than me, but I was really sad, and that was completely valid, and everything had changed and I had the right to feel sad about it. And I think the idea that you need to be positive at all times and think about your privileges. Sometimes you can't, and it doesn't matter who has it worse, because it's bad for you and it's allowed to be bad for you. You're allowed to feel like it's bad for you, even if there are people with it worse. And chances are there are people with it worse, because that's kind of the world, isn't it? It's a bit of a nightmare, and there will definitely be people with it worse, almost certainly. But you deserve to feel sad or feel bad or feel hard done by if you want to. And obviously it's not ideal, you don't want to be feeling like that all the time, but you can have moments. We all have moments where we just feel like the universe is handing me a short straw and I'm angry. Like, that's an okay thing to feel. And I think sometimes toxic positivity forgets you are entitled to your emotions, and positivity is good, but it's not the only thing, and it's not the only thing that can be beneficial. Along with toxic positivity is what I call in my head the don't let it ruin your life mentality. And this kind of narrative was spread around a lot when Chadwick Boseman died, the actor from Black Panther. He continued working on films and doing lots of incredible things whilst he had cancer. When he died, there was an outpouring of support and love for him. I did see a lot of people praising him for keeping working, continuing to film and act through debilitating cancer. And obviously, I'm not at all saying that he shouldn't have done that, but the narrative of praising that is a little bit problematic. It's not what everybody with cancer should be aiming at, to keep working. It's not something that should be, it's not for everybody. And I think quite often this type of thing is used as a narrative that also feeds into this toxic positivity. Chadwick Boseman continued to work all through late stages of cancer. How amazing. Clearly you can go to work because you've only got anxiety or whatever else. It's used as a pinnacle of this guy kept working through incredibly difficult things. So you, who I think doesn't have as difficult a time, you who I think are going through not nearly as difficult stuff, what are you doing? Why aren't you working? Why aren't you doing things? It can be used as a tool to hurt other people. And obviously this is not what the headlines mean to do. They mean to celebrate a wonderful actor who continued to work on art until the end of his life, which is amazing. But I think lots of people take that and criticize other people for not doing the same. And everybody's different. We can't assume that one person can work through a certain amount of pain and then for someone else can as well. And especially for people like me, I think not only do others kind of look at us and go, well, he could do that, so why can you not do things? But I also think we do it to ourselves. Think, wow, that's great. He was so amazing. It's so impressive. What am I doing? Because I don't have cancer. I'm not dying. And it can be used as a tool to hurt ourselves as well. That you see people doing amazing things with difficulties you perceive to be worse than yours, and it can make you feel bad about yourself. And that's not the intention of articles or anything like that, but it can sometimes be the outcome that we praise someone for doing something and overcoming all this adversity, and your brain turns around and goes, you've got it easier than them and you're not doing anything that cool. And that's so unhelpful. Like, we're all doing our best, and it doesn't matter if, you can't handle the things that someone else can. And I think we can celebrate an amazing actor's work and dedication to art without celebrating the notion that you should be pushing through, because I don't know about you, but I couldn't do that. Okay, and so finally, let's talk about the king of covert ableism in the media, inspiration porn. Inspiration porn is the use of disabled characters or real people who are only in the story or in the narrative to show how great it is that they've overcome their disability. It's their whole character or personality. They are there to inspire everyone of, look how hard it is for them and they've done such great things. Imagine what I could do. They're not fully fleshed out. They don't have characteristics beyond the disability. And sometimes inspiration porn can be tricky. Is it inspiration porn? Are they only there because they're disabled? Or is it good representation? Showing representation to people. Are they showing that someone with this difficulty can do this thing that you might not think they could? Are they spreading awareness and understanding? And honestly, I find inspiration porn the hardest to call whether it's ableist. And I sometimes just don't know, because I think it's a double-edged sword, and I think sometimes it can both be inspiration porn and be somewhat representation and awareness based. Sometimes news outlets will have on a person with a disability who has overcome it in some way, and the concept is inspiration porn completely. But then the person comes in, they talk about their story, and they really bring awareness and representation. And through what they say, how they say it, and just the fact that they're out there in a public setting where people who don't know about it will learn about it, can be useful. And I think it's not cut and dry. It is a complex subject, and I don't know. And obviously ways to avoid it is to flesh out characters or really delve into an individual to show that they're not just their disability, you know. I created this YouTube channel because of my disability. I did. And I want to help people understand, but I also mainly, I just want people who have the same experiences not to feel alone, like I felt alone. Like, that's my number one goal. I'm not only MECFS and anxiety and depression. I'm not only my diagnoses. I also am getting a degree in sociology. I'm a big fan of YouTube in general. I like Lego and I like crocheting. I know a lot about historical fashion, and I'm just obviously a human who is multifaceted, like all humans. And I think, well, I try to make sure like that comes across. So I don't seem like this one-dimensional person who just has some diagnoses and just talks about them and has no other personality and no other interest. That's not me at all, and I'm trying to make sure that comes across. I'm a person who talks about this subject because I think it's important, but not to seem that caricature of the inspirational disabled person. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please like it. Definitely comment down below and tell me if you've experienced ableism or you see it in the media, or if you've learnt something about ableism if you don't experience it yourself. Also, please subscribe. I'm aiming to hit 1,000 subscribers this year, so definitely hit the button to help me out, and stay tuned for the bloopers. Bye!
Welcome to Abla, trying to do a video while the kettle screams in the background. Can you hear the kettle?
Yeah. Oh, this video. So much faffing around. So little saying anything. Do you like the bubbles? The bubble hair? These things are very pervasive. These things are very pervasive. But it was a fluff. Ew, I didn't like that.